Welcome to the show, Ezekiel. How are you, man?
I'm good. How's it going?
Good, good. Real quick, where can people find you? You got this handle on Twitter that I can't pronounce, so why don't you shoot that out there for me?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter as Brohoshaphat G, and it's it's kind of complicated to spell. It's based on a biblical name. The idea is that it was one of the kings of Israel who kind of rediscovered the law of God and then got everybody back on track at some point. But anyway, it's Brohoshaphat.
Sweet. Brohoshaphat. Did I get that?
Yeah,
All right.
pretty much.
Brohoshaphat.
Yeah, I made that name a couple of years ago. I got the unique part down as far as SEO goes and all that. I did not get the anything else, so that's
nice. So
always fun.
do you have a YouTube channel? I seem to remember you
do.
had some videos, right?
That's actually my main thing is
Okay.
YouTube. That's where I've got most of the content, the biggest following, and all that, and it's the same.
Okay, awesome. So
And it's actually linked in my Twitter if that's easier to find.
yeah, we'll put that in the show notes too. So don't worry about trying to remember this. I'll put a link to both look below the podcast episode here. But we're going to talk about porn today. I know that's your specialty. That's sort of the main topic of your YouTube channel, and that's how I found you. We actually ended up in I started a group for guys who want to quit porn a while back, maybe a year or two ago. I can't remember how long ago that was, but it was a private chat on Twitter, and we evolved, and really the goal for all of us was we just wanted to kick the porn habit. And it seems to be a common theme. Before we get into all the reasons you should quit porn, it seems to be high on the list of things most men want to achieve. If you ask them, like, what are your goals right now? Like, man, I just got to quit the porn, right? Is that
Right,
is
assuming
that what
you can
hear?
even get them to talk about it at all.
Well, that's what I mean. When
That's-
you get candid and you get in these spaces where we'll call them the safe space for men, maybe the manosphere, whatever you want to call it. When people get candid and they're talking through their non-Twitter accounts, you'll see it come out. Like, and I really got to kick the porn habit. It's just not something people want to talk about under their real names and really disclose too much about. I've had a couple podcast guests where we've touched on the issue, but they shy away from it. They don't want to disclose too much. So we haven't really gotten deep into it, but that's going to be different today. I really want to dive into this, and I don't want to hold back because I think it's a major, major problem for men and society in general. And then even more so for children. I've got 2 young boys. I've got a daughter too, but I'm more concerned with the boys and their interaction with pornography. So a lot to talk about here. But you'd say a lot of people want to quit, right? That's what they're finding you on YouTube for, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mostly. And you can even see other movements that are, a lot bigger than anything I'm doing. Everybody's sort of no-fap by now. There's Fight the New Drug is a pretty big organization. There's Your Brain on Porn. Great resources, by the way, too. Those definitely good sites to check out if you're interested in some of the deeper scientific research and things like that. But yeah, there's a huge and growing interest in it. And I think part of that's just because people realize that anything that is both unnecessary and that difficult to quit can't possibly be good for you. If something is having more of an impact on your behavior than your own will does, which is, seems to be the case for a lot of people, then they, if you're smart, then you realize that, hey, something is wrong here. I've got to get control of this before it gets control of me.
Yeah, the name comes to mind. I can't remember exactly his name. I think it's David Eagleman or Eagleman. I can't remember. He's a brain researcher. And I watched his PBS special a couple years ago, and he talked about the mechanisms that are at work when you watch pornography and the sort of the chain reaction of events that happen in your brain that basically make it almost impossible once the chain of events has started, that it's almost impossible to stop, like akin to smoking a cigarette.
Even worse than cigarettes, really.
Even worse, really, right? Yeah, because there's not there's not other barriers to it, and so I know that holds true in my own experience with pornography. Is that once the chain of events are in place that sort of trigger, my habit, I would call it, it's darn near impossible to stop. Even if you're like aware and like, I don't want to do this. I really don't even want to do this, but you can't seem to stop yourself. So what's at work? What's going on in our brains when we form this pornography habit, and why does it have such a grip once you start?
Right. Well, before you even get to the part that's, internal inside your brain, it really does have a lot of things going for it. It's got a lot of advantages going into the battle against you, really. For one thing, nowadays, it's free and unlimited. So there's no, economic constraints on how much porn you can consume or when you can consume it or any of that. There's also just about infinite variety of porn. Probably anybody who's watched internet porn has, found some stuff that they never even knew existed and that they never even knew that they liked and that they didn't even want to like. And so you have no economic constraints. You have no, basically it's going to be really hard to get bored of it because there's so much variety out there. For another thing, there's not really, until you just, fall over because your body makes you sleep, there's no real limit on how much you can consume in one sitting. So like you compare it to food. Okay, food, like sex, is a natural desire. It's a natural, urge, a hunger to have food. But there's a physical limit on how much you can eat, and there's economic limits on how much that you can get unless you're super rich. In pornography, it has almost an even stronger, biological urge behind it, but it doesn't have any of those limits at all. And so you can just keep consuming and consuming and consuming and getting that hit of dopamine over and over and over again, and it never has to end. And so it just reinforces itself. It kind of entrenches itself inside your brain a lot more than, say, food addiction or something like that could.
And it's new, right? We're talking in the last, pornography itself, as far as availability to consume by most men, is what, 30, 40 years? Maybe get some VHS tapes 30, 40 years ago. And that was significantly different than what you're seeing now, which is with the internet and in your home and unlimited supply. Even 15, 20 years ago, it would be like maybe you go to an adult movie store and get a DVD or something. But things have changed so much, and we're seeing just the beginning of this era of pornography being available, and we don't even know what the consequences are to each individual man or even as a society.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And like you said, just as recently as a couple decades ago, there were pretty big economic constraints and social constraints because, it's a lot harder to go out and be secretly buying, physical videotapes and stuff like that than it is to have something on your computer that's, really difficult for anybody, to trace or find out about or any of that. And now, browsers, they've got an option to, automatically erase everything for you. So you don't even have to worry about it at all. And, like I said, it's free and everything like that. It wasn't always free unless you stole it, of course. But
Right.
It's just changed immensely. And it's something that we biologically, I think it's something that we've never really encountered before. We've never had anything like this that's so abundant, so readily available, that has so much variety, that there's no physical limit on how much you can consume. And that kind of plays to, our most pressing biological desire, which is sex.
It's fascinating, this point you make about there's no limit on consumption, because I'm thinking about everything that I can possibly think of, and everything has a limit, right? You can only smoke so many cigarettes in a day. You can only drink so much alcohol before you pass out, or there's just only so much you can drink in a limited amount of time, and economically as well. And so really this is the vice that is unlimited.
Unless you're addicted to reading, then you're probably not going to find anything else that's going to be quite the same. And I'd say that's a much better addiction to have.
I'd say so. My son is addicted to reading right now, and I'll take that over, maybe even video games. I don't know how that compares.
Yeah, video games would be, those would probably be a fairly close runner-up. There's a lot of variety. There's a lot of free stuff out there now. It can be very addictive. At the same time, though, I think that, and I'm not a gamer by any means, I'm not trying to come to the defense of video games, But it can train certain skills. It can develop certain parts of your brain, and it's not so much focused on this innate biological desire on redirecting a natural instinct that you have into something that's meaningless. It kind of just is to have fun.
Yeah, there's definitely not that biological pull, no doubt about it. Yeah, my son he's got ADHD, and he tends to get hyper focused and addicted to certain things, and video games is one thing that I've allowed him to dive into because of all the things that he can really get, what I don't want to say addicted because that has a negative connotation, but as far as things he can get really hooked on, video games are some of the least destructive, in my opinion, of what he can do. He's learning some things. He's connecting with friends online. It's not the worst in the world. But my challenge is to keep him off porn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be tough because each generation is always without fail, unless you seriously work in the technology industry or something like that. Each generation is going to be more tech savvy than their parents. It's just a matter of things. And so you can, as a parent, you can kind of throw up all the filters and web blockers and stuff like that you want, and chances are they're still going to find a way through it. And that's kind of why even with people who are trying to limit themselves, I don't necessarily recommend web blockers and stuff like that, because I think the most important thing is to train the desire for one thing, and also the ability to resist those kind of temptations and urges when they just come and hit you in the face.
Yeah, why don't we talk about that for a minute? For those tuning in, I know a lot of people tune into the first 20, 40 minutes of the show on their commutes, and so let's catch the most important part they might be looking for, which is, what can I do? I want to quit porn, and we'll go into that later. We'll go into the reasons why you should quit and all the damage it could be doing. We'll talk about all those other things. But like right now, the guy driving to work, 20 minutes to listen, like, what can I do to start down the path of quitting porn? I wake up every morning and I'm ashamed of myself of what I did last night, and I hate it. But then, 16 hours later, I'm back in front of that computer doing it again, and I hate myself again. So how can we stop that cycle? How can you quit porn?
There's a few key points I want to make, and then also a few one general principle I want to lay out first is that everybody's different. Everybody's brain works differently. I was actually listening to your podcast with Artful Man the other day, and it got me thinking, everybody's brains are going to function differently. Different tactics and strategies are going to work to varying degrees for different people. And so I think it's really important to always be learning, to be, seeking out information from other guys who are doing the same thing, who are going through the same fight and who've had success. And to always adapt your strategy, find out, why am I failing? What can I do to counter this strategy basically that's working against me? And then move on from there. Always be adapting, always be changing to basically to fit what's going on the battlefield. The other thing related to that is that, I'm Christian, so for me, I definitely believe that, that Satan is behind all this, that it's all his fault, and that he is a conscious thinking entity who is strategizing, to make people fall into this. But whether you're Christian or not, I think it's useful to view this as being a, conscious thinking, logical enemy who is strategizing against you. So you can kind of not necessarily put a face to the temptations, but see them in a more strategic framework, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important point, because no matter where you fall on the religious spectrum, I view it as, by viewing porn, you're letting something dark and devious into the most intimate part of your life. And so, no matter how you view it from that spiritual standpoint, even if you're a very practical, non-spiritual person, you're letting something negative into the closest possible circle of your mind and physical space by opening that browser and going onto porn sites. That's how I view it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes you can make is to view it as just this, dumb animalistic desire that doesn't really, that really, there's nothing to it.
Right.
Because if you just, sit back and look at what goes on, maybe even look at your own history, you notice, hey, this thing, even if it's just, my own brain taking advantage of things, it definitely resembles a strategist. It takes advantage of, environment and different circumstances and things that happen in life, and, your mindset, your attitude, and tries to work its way around your existing strategies and things like that to try and beat you.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely that strategic, almost a warlike element to that. And I think it's really important to understand that and to really appreciate, the kind of enemy that it is.
Yeah, and it sucks your energy. It is one way I look at it. Like, I try to visualize physically my energy being sucked from me into that screen. Like, this is just draining resources that could be put to better use and toward my goals and my missions, toward my kids, my businesses, my work, my relationships, all that stuff. And it's pulling away from that. Whether it's, even if you looked at it as the highest level, okay, which isn't true, but let's just say the porn itself isn't hurting me, but what are you losing? An hour of sleep every night? Watching it, even that hour of sleep is making a huge difference in your sense of well-being and what you can accomplish in this world.
Right. Yeah. An hour of sleep, an hour of reading,
Anything,
literally
right?
Pretty much anything else, even an hour of gaming would be better than that.
Would be better. Anything. Talk to a friend. It doesn't matter. That hour is lost to a negative activity.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, 99% of people who don't have time for XYZ are probably, watching porn a few hours after they say that exact same thing.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, I know people, and we'll talk about this later, but this is one thing that stands out to me is I can almost tell which guys watch porn. It's almost like on their face. And I can't say that I'm 100% positive about that, but when I meet somebody and they got a certain face about them and I learn a little bit about their daily habits, I can almost guarantee you which ones are watching porn. And it's a look almost. It's almost a look, and I can't describe it, but you just know. Like, man, that guy's got like porn face. It's just, there's something about it that screams, and I think people can sense something from you if you're a regular porn watcher. That
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think this is just a theory. This is just based on my own personal anecdotes. But I think that kids are really good at it and don't even know it.
At sensing it, you mean? At sensing the porn face?
Right. I remember when I was, there was probably about a year or so where I was going back and forth, about once a month or so. And I started to notice, I'm very much a kids guy. Like, I love hanging out and playing with kids and all that kind of stuff. And I started to notice, that it seems like they're acting differently, based on whether last night was a success or a failure. And I started to pay more attention and more attention. And at first I'm like, there's no way this can be right. There's no way they can tell. But I think they can. I think they can sense that something's just a little bit off. They have no idea what it is, of course.
Right.
But that's been my experience anyway. I don't know if that's, just a fluke or what that is. But I definitely agree with what you're saying there.
Yeah, and I don't know if it could be just projection, a little bit of, if you've watched porn the night before, you're carrying around this little bit of subconscious shame.
Right.
And
yeah,
so,
and it could be just your own confidence too.
And so, like, you're projecting, and anything you see in another person that seems to be acting different toward you, you're saying, yeah, it's because I'm an idiot. I watched porn last night. I'm weak, and they can sense that I'm weak. I think it just undermines all of your confidence, even if you think it doesn't. I think there's some subconscious element to it.
Right. And either way, whether it's them noticing that something is different or if it's just, you acting different, the result is the same. Your life is different at that point.
Oh, absolutely. It changes the way you think, and it drains your energy. If you're thinking about that at all, you've lost, right? Like, you've got a million things we should be thinking about in a day, and the shame of what we did last night shouldn't be one of them.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of brings up the next point that I want to make, which is kind of a pretty big consideration. One of the biggest things that I've learned, and that's been really big for other people, is the idea of guilt. Strategically, and I'm going to keep saying the word strategically because that's how I think about this. But it's really, really important to not exist in that guilt, to try and get rid of that as soon as you can, no matter how recently you failed, because the fact of the matter is the past is the past. It's just gonna, steal even more of your energy if you keep stressing over it, because you can't even change it. So the best thing to do is to just learn from it and move on. I like to make a distinction between conviction and guilt. And even though this isn't necessarily accurate based on the dictionary definitions, I like to say that conviction is what, propels you to change, that lets you know, hey, you did something wrong. You need to change this. Then you say, okay, I'm sorry. I repent. I'm going to change it now. And then after that, there's not really a place for ongoing guilt. What I've found in my personal experience, and I'm sure tons of other people feel the same way. In fact, I know they do, because they've said as much in messages and comments to me. When you have this ongoing guilt over things that are in the past that you did bad, and now you're trying to change it. When you have this ongoing guilt, that causes you to identify with that past. It forces that past to be part of your present identity. And that just keeps you doing the same thing over and over and over again, because instead of seeing it as something you did, you're like, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm just a filthy porn addict. So of course I'm going to, watch porn over and over again. And it's not like that. If it was that blatant, then we'd be able to counter it more easily. But that's kind of what's going on in the background there. Anytime that you have that ongoing guilt. So one of the most important things that I tell people is you've got to let go of that guilt. Stop holding on to those chains that are keeping you in that prison, and move forward. Learn from it. Learn from the past. Remember the past by all means, but don't live in the past.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really good point. For me personally, and you said you noted that all of our brains work differently. The guilt is my biggest deterrent. So I hate the feeling of the guilt. And so that has reached a point, and this is where I've had success in getting rid of this habit, is that I hate that feeling so much that I don't want to recreate the feeling. And so that's my motivation not to watch porn, is because I want to wake up the next day and not have that twinge of guilt that I feel when I've done it. And so that it's hit that point. It's sort of like, I can't eat gluten or else I get sick. So if I eat gluten, I enjoy it in the moment, but then the next day I pay for it, right? So that there's a deterrent to my behavior in that I don't want to pay for it the next day. And it's gotten to the point where with porn, what I pay for it the next day has eclipsed the momentary pleasure I get from engaging in it. And so now that has been a motivation enough for me to stop.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah, and that's, kind of like I said, finding out which strategies work for you in particular, and then, adopt them, keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's stuff that works for other people that doesn't work for me. Like people have said cold showers. Anytime you get an urge, take a cold shower or do push-ups. And I love cold showers. Like, it's great. I'll take them every day if I can. But it doesn't really, there's not really the connection there for me. It doesn't really make a difference in that particular area. And doing push-ups doesn't really seem to make a difference in that particular area. For some people, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I've tried a lot of different things, and really just committing in my mind to not wanting to feel that way was the only one that really overcame it. Also putting a few physical barriers between myself and porn, which it sounds silly, but there's been when I was really in the thick of it, like now that I've really broken free, when I get an urge, it's easier to combat it without these physical barriers. But when I was first trying to break the habit, I had to put in some things like my Wi-Fi had to be off at night when I went to bed. And so then I'd go to bed, and then the trigger would be there to engage in porn. But in order to do so, I'd have to get up and go to my basement and turn on the Wi-Fi and get back up and go back to bed. And that was usually enough to be like, I don't really feel like getting up and walking to the basement. And so that,
right.
that was that.
Weaponized
right?
laziness.
Right. Like it was just enough of a barrier to give me a second thought and realized I didn't really want to do that. It really wasn't worth the effort to get up. And it also made me consider the negative side of engaging in porn, which was, well, I'm getting out of bed. Now I'm going to turn on the Wi-Fi. How much sleep am I going to lose here just by doing this? You know, I could be asleep in 5 minutes, and instead I'm going to be asleep in, an hour. So it helped me consider those. That was one thing I used to get over it. And it was an easy fix. Didn't cost me anything. Just, at a certain point in the night, just turn off the Wi-Fi.
Oh, but what if somebody Snapchats you in the middle of the night? Can't lose that.
Oh yeah. I've never used Snapchat, so what the hell. I'm like a different generation though. Not the Snapchat generation for sure. But and getting the phone out of my hand at night was a big piece of it too.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that is and I encounter this all the time, which is, it seems straightforward, it seems obvious, but I encounter it so often in different people that you just have to say it, is that you always really do have a choice. And it sounds so silly to even have to call it out, but that was one of the biggest realizations that I had when I finally quit long term. And it was just, actually realizing and fully understanding that, there's no such thing as I can't help it, or I can't control it, or, this is too strong for me. As strong as it is, at the end of the day, just the way your nervous system works, you have total control over whether you do or don't. And so there really is no excuse. There's no, you're not helpless, basically, is kind of the gist of it. It's not stronger than you are, as strong as it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's true in everything in life, right? Where, are you going to live life where you're taking charge and you're making the decisions, or are you going to play helpless and think that everything's just happening to you? And this is at the very root of it. So beyond that,
one way I like to say it is that porn can't rape you. It's
I like it. How from your, do you work with people individually, or is it just basically your YouTube channel?
I do, to an extent. People will send me private messages and I converse with them over YouTube, or on there's a Discord group that one of the people who watches my stuff made, and it kind of blew up, and we got a bunch of people on there now. And sometimes we do private messages. We talk as a group and all that kind of stuff as well. I've had people contact me on Twitter, through email. I even had one person, and this sounds super creepy, but I don't really see it that way that much. One person actually sent me a letter, even though I don't have any of that information out there. They were smart enough to figure it out. But wow, it sounds really creepy, but it was actually I did appreciate that, as much as I could. But yeah, lots of people, whenever I try to help anybody who will come to me looking for help. And of course, as my platform grows, it gets more difficult to do that. And at some point, I probably won't be able to anymore. But I do that. I've done that with people in real life as well, people who I know personally. Try and help them out as much as I can, and typically they'll move on for that a little bit later after I've told them all I can. Part of that kind of comes from I'm really that kind of personality where I like to help other people grow. And kind of going on a little bit of a tangent here, but for about 2 or 3 years, there was this one friend of mine who was just video game addicted and stuff like that. We never really talked about porn, but he was kind of, shut in, didn't have a lot of friends. He had, he had some social issues that he kind of used as an excuse to not do much of everything. And I basically tried to mentor him for about 2 or 3 years, and I tried everything I could, to get him to change and get out of that and actually start living instead of just, living inside of a computer, basically. and just couldn't get anything to happen. So now that there's people who are actually wanting to change, who are actually wanting to do the work, and I have that opportunity to invest, I'm like, yes, this is what I always wanted to do all along, and haven't been able to because I was investing so much in kind of a dead end. That anytime that comes up, I do like to jump on it.
What do you say to people who might say, you know what, I don't see any reason to quit porn. I just, it's fine, doesn't seem to have any negative impacts. It's silly. It's a silly fight to take on. I'm fine with watching it, blah, blah, blah. And I get that a lot because whenever I post something to Twitter about staying clear of porn, it'll be one or two people who will say, whatever, you're just virtue signaling or something along those lines. Then they'll say, it's porn's fine, don't worry about it.
I don't bother.
Okay.
The pendulum has kind of swung all the way to the other end now. I don't know if it'll, settle back towards the center. But, I spent so much time trying to help somebody who didn't want to be helped. And, I'm not bitter about it or anything. I still love the guy. But, you spend so much time trying to help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. And then you find hundreds of people who do want to be helped. Why would I spend, my limited time trying to convince people to want to be helped when I could spend it much more effectively at helping the people who actually want to do the work, who actually want to change?
Well, it's a lot like diets, right? You can't convince somebody they need to lose weight, but once they're ready and they've decided to lose weight, you can help them reach their goal, right?
Right. To me, there's lots and lots of fertile ground out there. But I've only got a limited amount of time, a limited amount of seed. Don't like to use that term in this context, but there's limited time, limited seed, and more fertile ground than I can cover. So why would I be trying to, terraform some other kind of land to make it more suitable when there's, plenty already there?
Right.
It's plenty for me anyway.
Seems a very low ROI. To go on that path, right? So let's switch gears a little bit and talk on the macro level, because I think that plays into this next segment nicely, which is, porn's only going to get worse, right? We're moving into a world of like virtual reality.
I hate that.
This we're like, you think it's bad now that you can just go online and find videos, but I mean it's going to get worse. This isn't like something that's going to come to an end. And so it's going to become even more widespread, even more easily accessible, to the point where even and that last question was kind of leading up to this, which is a social acceptability of it that, where the shame will start to go away. And you see this with other things, in the culture wars, and we won't get into that, but you'll see like where something it gets introduced that's shameful, and then over time the culture works to reduce the shame of that act, and to the point where then it becomes socially acceptable to do this thing that was once shameful to do. And so I predict you'll see that with porn, where it'll just be like out in the open, sort of accepted that it's okay to do, and that nobody's shamed for doing it. Where are we headed on the big picture cultural scale with all this stuff?
Yeah, I think you're right. Overall, it's going to be, very much just a trend of it getting worse and worse and worse. Overall, anyway, at least for the foreseeable future. You never know what kind of wild card is going to come out and change everything. Like 4 years ago, if you told me Donald Trump was going to be president, I'd be like, right. But
yeah,
you never do know. The thing I'm looking at, though, is that, at the same time, the information out there on its negative effects is growing, and kind of the counter movement against it is also growing. And while pornography gets worse and worse and worse, we're also finding out more and more about it. And so you have these organizations like I mentioned earlier, Fight the New Drug, Your Brain on Porn, NoFap, that are gaining more and more ground as, people start to be like, man, this isn't okay. And the thing that gives me hope about that is that, as far as I've seen, it only moves in one direction. You don't have people who know the truth and then just decide, nah, pornography is all right. It kind of just is, people are addicted to porn. They think porn's okay. And then maybe somewhere along the line, they find out the truth. And then they can't really forget that. You can't unswallow the red pill, for lack of a better term.
Do you think it'll be like smoking, sort of like where at some point smoking was considered totally healthy and acceptable, and then once it got into people's head that, hey, this stuff is bad for you and it's killing us, you saw it reverse over time. I mean, it wasn't immediate, obviously, but ever since that point, the rates of smoking have decreased every year since the point it was deemed to be unhealthy.
I think it could. Probably not as much as smoking, or at least as quickly as smoking did, though, because like we went through all those reasons earlier why porn is so compelling and so hard to get out of. It can stay a secret. It's kind of hard to keep smoking, completely a secret.
Right. Well, plus having your life shortened is a pretty compelling reason to, right, to quit something.
Well, I mean, in a way, pornography shortens your life. It's just it shortens it, 1 hour out of a day instead of all at the end.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it, right? Yeah, if you want to give up, an hour a day, which, equate that over the rest of your life, what is that, a couple of years of your life? Mm-hmm. Do you want to give that up to staring at a screen? Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I think over time there will be pushback, and eventually I hope that it will be recognized, overall for what it really is, and kind of be rejected, at least in the open, like smoking has been. I don't know for sure though. It's of course tobacco was really entrenched and still made that. I think pornography is really entrenched, and it's going to be difficult to fight that.
Well, we could see it. This could take time, right? I mean, we could see.
Right.
We might not even. I would say we're probably not near the peak yet before we start to head the other direction, right? Like we're still on the ramp up.
Probably.
We haven't hit that tipping point where so many people think it's bad that it's starting to decline. If anything, you have a whole generation coming up with unlimited access to it at such an early age, we don't even know what's going to happen. I mean, we get kids with iPhones at 10 years old, and they have access to every pornographic act known to man at their fingertips, and they're 10 years old. We have no idea what that's going to do.
Mm-hmm. From what we've seen so far, it's not going to be good.
Oh, I can't. This is a subject that really keeps me up at night. There's not too many things that really concern me, but having kids right around that 10-year-old age, and where they're getting curious and they're getting online and they can find so many things with just a couple clicks of a mouse, scares the shit out of me, to be honest, because I don't want them to go down that path, but it's going to be impossible for me to keep them from coming across something before the age where I think they're ready to handle it. It's almost going to be impossible, just because you can't monitor every minute of every day of every interaction they have. And I don't give my kids phones. They won't get phones till they're driving. But even then, I mean, I watch everything they do online. The only place they can be online is in the living room where I can see what they're doing. But it only takes 2 minutes of me stepping out of the room, and they got 2 clicks, and now they know what's out there. Right. Mm-hmm. It doesn't take much at all.
Yeah, and that's still something that I'm not a parent. My parents didn't really, deal with me as far as pornography and stuff like that goes. It's hard to say what really is the best way to handle that. Is it better to get to them first and let them know what's out there, or is that just going to make them more curious? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it good to, try and keep web blockers up as long as they're under your roof? Because, I mean, at some point they're going to have to fight on their own. And right. There's kind of the question of, do they learn to fight when they're kind of in a, more reinforced position? They're around you, they're around somebody that they can talk to and learn how to fight this with, or later on when they're, kind of all alone and they might not know about all the resources out there to help them quit, or even the reasons to quit. So yeah, I do not know the best way to handle that. I'll probably find out at some point with my own kids. I like to figure stuff out and figure out the best way to do things. And then at that point, I'll do a video about that. But until then, I don't really know. I don't think that, you know, web blockers are 100% effective. I don't know if they're even 1% effective, you know, in the long run. Because ultimately, it's not just about keeping them safe while they're under your roof. The only reason for that is so that they live a good. You want whatever strategy that you do adopt to build up to them having the best adulthood possible.
Yeah, you cut out there for just a second, but I get what you're saying, and I think that you can only do so much. But I think the longer that my stance right now is I have kids that are around 10 years old, and so my stance at this point anyway is the longer I can prolong their even knowing that this stuff exists, the better off I'm going to be. And then once they hit a point where it's inevitable and they're going to find out about it, or they're going to come across it because they're spending more time with peers or something, then they'll have a conversation about the importance of staying away from that. Now, that's only marginally effective. I'm aware of that. But to prepare them, I think the longer, it's sort of like sexual contact, in my opinion. Like the studies have shown that the longer kids go without sexual contact, the better off their outcomes in life. I'm certain the same will hold true with porn. And so,
and I think it actually does. Now that you mention it, I seem to remember. I think I read it in the book "Your Brain on Porn." There's a website and there's also a book. Both are excellent. But I think that there was research done, or at least, you know, enough reports to establish this, that the negative effects of porn addiction are overcome more easily and quickly by older guys who got into, you know, internet porn later in their life than by younger guys. So I think that you're on the right track there, that, you know, the longer they stay away from it, then the better it's going to be overall. The easier it's going to be to fight it and, you know, recover from it if necessary later on down the road.
Yeah, I just can't imagine from an evolutionary standpoint or from a, you know, just a brain standpoint, that a developing young brain at 10, 11, 12 years old was meant to come across sexual, you know, that much sexual, I don't know what the right word is, imagery, might be for lack of a better word. Like, you know, before pornography, a 10, 11, or 12-year-old was, you know, wasn't even going to see a woman naked for another 5 years. And so from a brain standpoint, their brains are not equipped for that, to handle that. And so the executive functioning in their brains, and I've researched a lot of this because of my son, but the executive functioning in their brains is still developing, which the executive functioning is the part that says, you know, I should or should not do X, Y, or Z, is so limited at that age. To come across something so compelling and so addicting and with such a pull, it's like, you know, bringing a knife to a gunfight. There's nothing you can do to prepare a 11-year-old to come across that kind of thing. So the best thing you can do is keep them away from coming across it, right? And limit their access and limit their phone. I'm a big proponent of limiting phones. I hate this trend of people giving their kids phones at younger and younger ages. I see no reason for any kid to have a smartphone with them until they're driving a car and leaving the house without an adult. I just don't get it. People say, oh, it's great, I can keep in touch with my kid. Well, hell, I didn't keep in touch with my parents. You know, I could pick up a phone and call them if I needed to, but
we used walkie-talkies when I was a kid.
Yeah, I did the same thing, you know, or God forbid I had to ask my friend's parents to use their phone so I could call my house, you know. Like, it's just different times, but I see no reason to put a phone in a kid's hand. And I don't care, like you said, I don't care how much filtering you put on there. These kids are smart. They'll get around it. They'll figure it out. There's stuff that doesn't get stopped by the filter. Kids are clever. They'll get to it.
And it's not just them. You know, there are people out there who just want to share that with other people for some reason. You know, and you see it all the time, especially on, you know, Christian boards and stuff like that, which would be like, oh, you know, yay, my kid's on a nice Christian website or something like that. And next thing you know, somebody's, you know, gone in there and posted gay porn all over the place. It was actually having that There's a one Christian message board that I'm involved with that recently has been like 3 times in a row, just, the entire forum covered in it. And that's just,
that's
there's just people who do that.
People are just purposely attacking the forums then, just to create problems.
And not even just Christian ones, it's not necessarily even a religious thing, just anywhere, just because they can.
It's like spamming even. It just shows up. Yeah, that's too bad. And it's really a daunting challenge. And I think that limiting kids' access to internet, unsupervised internet, is a very wise move, and that's been my strategy to this point. It's worked so far. There's no electronic devices or internet except in the living room when I'm there, and I can see what they're doing. I mean, I'm not crazy. I'm not going to say you can't ever go on the internet. I mean, let's face it, these kids are going to grow up with the internet. They need to know how to use it. They need to know how to interact with it. That's just part of their life. But for now, there's no reason they need to use it without me around, and that's just the way it's going to be. And they complained a little bit because their friends get to do a little bit more, but I've had to do other things too. Like I won't let my son have sleepovers at friends' houses because they don't monitor the electronic usage. So they're going to have an iPad. A couple 11-year-old boys are going to be in a bedroom with an iPad till 3 a.m. Well, guess what's going to happen? They're going to be finding that stuff. I remember what I was like when I was that age, and I was trying to unscramble the Playboy channel and the cable. But you got to be. You're going to be hated for some of the things that you do, but that's okay. That's part of our job.
Right, and they will appreciate it later.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Maybe not till much later, but it's
right.
You got to do what you got to do. I think that it's the same way. I'm not still sure how the porn issue affects girls. They don't seem to be as compelled. They do seem curious at times, but it doesn't seem to create the. Maybe that's because women are just different sexual beings. So men are use imagery more. As an indicator, and maybe that's why they're more drawn to it. Women seem to maybe view it out of curiosity, but then very few.
Well, women are more erotic novels and stuff like that, which is its own
different thing.
Big
right?
mess.
Yeah.
But,
right.
Yeah,
that even seems to have less of a pull, at least from an addiction standpoint, than just this vast imagery that's available.
Mm-hmm. Probably, I would say so. Partly just a matter of how the way women are. I could probably get thinking about all the different factors that probably play into this. Sex is usually more readily available for women, so they don't necessarily need an alternative as often. All kinds of stuff could probably go into.
Yeah, that's
economic limitations too. Books there's going to be less, probably less free written material out there than there is, at least that caters to women, than there is, videos that cater to men, just the way the internet is right now.
Even the time commitment, right? Like to read a book.
Right, yeah, you actually have to focus on something instead of just letting it, happen in front of you.
Right, and you have to use your imagination. It's just totally different.
It's too much work.
Yeah, I'm sure. Although 50 Shades of Grey was bestseller, so clearly there's that market for that, but it definitely seems less problematic, at least on a larger scale, as this porn stuff. So
that's not quite my area of expertise.
No, I won't go too far down that. Although I just like to
let some woman out there deal with that.
Yeah. There needs to be a get me off of trashy novel YouTube channel or something. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to this conversation about porn. What men can do. Or is it really just come down to they hit a point in their life where they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do it, and I'm going to look for resources to quit. And eventually, if they want to do it, they'll figure out a way to quit.
I don't think that that's quite all there is to it. I think that there's kind of two different levels to this. There's the individual level, which is kind of, going along and learning and figuring it out and, getting serious enough to do it and so on. And then I think that there's also, I think that there's really a need for more of a group focused level in this. And that's why I do stress accountability a lot in my videos. I want guys to fight this together because there are so many different, there's so much in society and the internet and all that is combined almost to bring us down in this regard. And I think it's kind of silly to fight it alone. And I think it's kind of silly to see it as just a personal issue. So I'm definitely big on, getting groups together like we had on Twitter or like I'm in on Discord right now. And I keep going back to war analogies and stuff like that, but almost, kind of turn it into a kind of war. Not necessarily a violent one, not necessarily even like a legislative one. I know some people are more for like banning pornography and stuff like that, which for one thing, it's not going to work. For another thing, I don't think that it's, that kind of establishes the right, the frame of mind that you're looking for. If you don't do it because you can't, well, did you really quit or is it just the circumstances? My kind of, it's going to sound kind of crazy, but my kind of dream that I have in the back of my head, that kind of, the vision I have that sort of drives all of this is I would like to see in my lifetime, probably won't, but I would like to see the porn industry just completely go bankrupt and cease to exist, not because of any kind of, legislative action or anything like that, but just because of a lack of demand. And so, quitting porn on an individual basis, yes, but also living out this lifestyle together and showing that lifestyle together and showing that, yes, this is better than what everybody else is doing. Yes, pornography is causing a problem. And really making an effort to, how do I say this? Not to go out and, argue people into quitting porn, but just to make it inescapably clear that it is a bad thing, that it is detrimental, that it is killing masculinity, and that you can actually quit. It's not impossible.
I like that. I really like the sort of starve the beast model. That's my take on a lot of government issues in general is, I'd rather see them handled organically like that. But, so, your last point there, I just had a thought, and it just escaped me. I hate that.
But before this escapes me, I wanted to go back and touch on the issue with kids real quick.
Yeah.
Because we kind of left it on sort of a hopeless note there.
Yeah.
But I think probably the most important thing, come to think of it, is just, cultivating, this really powerful culture of discipline. Jocko Willink could probably tell you more about that than I could. But I was raised, in a really discipline-oriented family. We got spanked, as we should have been. And, there were fairly strict rules on everything. And, when my dad said attention, we had to stand there at attention until he said at ease. And that's just how we lived.
I love it.
And I think that really sets you up for success later on when you decide, yes, I want to do this. I don't want to do this. I've got to make myself do or not do this thing. If you have that background in discipline and just, that ability to not only delay gratification, but to deny gratification, then that's going to go a long way towards helping you quit.
That's a good point. I think we're lacking, I've tweeted about this a lot lately, but I think fathers are lacking leadership, lacking discipline, and most importantly, you have to be disciplined yourself if you're going to discipline your kids. You can't expect your kids to not watch porn if you're sneaking off and watching porn every night. It's just, they're going to sense that dishonesty. They're going to
Yeah, like I said, kids can tell.
Kids can tell. I mean, I
Maybe.
just don't. They can. I think they can just sense the insincerity that you're not being genuine. So if you're watching porn every night and you're telling your kids not to watch porn, they're gonna sense in your voice and it's impossible to hide this sort of disconnect between reality and what you're saying. And you'll say it with a little less conviction, something they'll pick up on. But you got to get yourself in order first. You got to have discipline in your own life before you can discipline your kids. And this is something I've learned the hard way. I was not a great father the first few years of my kid's life just because I was a mess. I was, drinking and porn and sloppy eating and just unhealthy, and I wasn't disciplined. And how could I expect my kids to be disciplined and respectful of me if I wasn't disciplined and respectful of my own body and myself? And you got to get that together. You got to get that sorted out first before you can expect to do that with kids. And you don't have to, do it all at once, but you got to do it. You got to get there. Jocko Willink is great. I'd love to have him on the show sometime, but I think he's a great example of, maybe he's the most extreme example, but, you, as a parent, you always have to err on the side of discipline. So if you're not sure which way to go, I say always break to the side of discipline, and you can't go wrong. Breaking to the side of I'm going to go easy has a lot more chance for things to go wrong than breaking to the side of discipline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, worst case scenario, if you're too disciplinarian, then your kid ends up like Jocko Willink, and that's not such a bad thing.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's always that chance if you're too strict that you'll have the kid who sort of rebels, but you can always pull back a little if you need to.
And that's a lot easier than trying to, say, oh, okay, I've let you guys get away with too much. Now it's time to, get more strict.
Yeah, trust me, your kids will laugh at you if you try that. If you're like, never had any rules, and all of a sudden you're going to say, okay, here's the rules. They're going to roll their eyes, and you've got an uphill battle from there. So, yeah, it's always better to be on the side of discipline first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially with yourself. I forget where I heard it, but I've heard it said anyway that, kids don't follow advice, they follow examples. And so if you want them to live a certain way, then you've got to live that way yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
I see parents all the time who, they smoke and they tell their kids, hey, don't smoke. And then what happens? Your kids are smoking. Yeah. The parents who drink and drink and say, hey, don't become an alcoholic. Don't be like me. And then almost every single time, there are exceptions. But just about every single time, the kids end up in the same boat. And then later on, they're going to have kids, and the same process is going to repeat over and over again. It's kind of like like in the Bible, it kind of refers to the idea of a generational curse. It's almost like that, actually is happening before your eyes there.
Yeah, you can see that for sure. One thing I talked about in my podcast episode with Hut a while back, but we like to talk about a lot on Twitter, is this idea of shaming things. I'm a big proponent of this, and Hut got me sort of turned on to it. But if you're doing the behavior that you want your kids to exhibit, then you're on the right path. But I see no problem at all with shaming behavior you don't want them to follow. It sounds a little harsh sometimes. People
like shaming other people's behavior.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
So if you see something degenerate going on, like I like to shame things like tattoos or whatever. Like, I don't want my daughter to get tattoos, so I'll shame tattoos. I'll say like, oh God, look at, she ruined her. It's a cute girl, and man, she really messed it up with that tattoo. And my daughter will kind of raise her eyebrow, and it's just little things like that, or just, I'll shame smoking. I don't smoke. Clearly, if I'm doing it, I can't shame it, right? But I'm already doing the things that I want them to do, so I shame it. I'll say, God, that, I can't believe that person's smoking. They're going to take 10 years off their life. They're not even going to see their grandkids grow up. And just little things like that make a huge difference. I shame it all the time. I think it's one of the most powerful parenting tools that I've taken on over the past couple of years, is just shaming behaviors in other people that I don't want my kids to do. And it works. It's way more powerful than sitting down and like having this lecture where you're talking at your kids and saying, you shouldn't get a tattoo, or you shouldn't smoke, or you should, those things are marginally necessary only because I think they're not that effective. because kids are looking outside at examples and things, and they're not really going to listen when you sit down and talk about some awkward subject. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, you should, but that's not where the difference is made. They're not going to sit down. They're just thinking about how awkward this is and how can I make this end.
Right.
But if you're talking and you're just driving in the car and you see something degenerate and you say, God, look at that moron doing that, that kind of thing. And then they start to equate like negative behaviors with negative descriptions of people like that they don't want to be. And I think it's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that's excellent. I think all parents should do that. It's not just like, it's okay to make fun of people. You should do that.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Why do kids, disobey and do bad stuff, half the time anyway?
Right.
It's because they don't want to be made fun of or, to be called something bad by other kids. That's how peer pressure works. So clearly for a lot of kids, the desire to avoid punishment is weaker than the desire to not be made fun of. And so if you, make fun of those behaviors that you don't want them to have, then I think that's definitely powerful and effective.
It's very powerful. And some people have said you shouldn't do it because, you're judging other people. Well, my take on that is that, I'm not judging someone's spiritual standing with God, right? I'm just judging a behavior. And so it's always out there that you can judge the sin. Don't judge the sinner, just judge the sin, right? And so I take no reservations in shaming, and it's been effective. It's effective too, not just with kids, but I think it's effective with peers. Like if you're hanging out with buddies and you really want them to start changing something, like if you got a buddy you're hanging out with and he's, put on some pounds and he's not very healthy, you're not going to it's not very effective to say, hey dude, I think you put on some weight, you need to do something. Cause that doesn't really work. I've tried that. But if you just poke fun at other people you see who look like him or have gained some weight or look heavy, he's going to get that message without you having to say it straight to his face. And it's going to be more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. That's actually I can relate to that too in my own experience with pornography, because actually how I started getting serious about it was back in, I remember the day. It was August 31st in 2014 was when I really started to take it seriously. And I was actually on the politically incorrect board on 4chan of all places. And they started talking about porn. They had a thread up, hey, pornography, porn addicted cucks, the Jews are behind all this, all that kind of stuff that they talk about there. And they decided, hey, we're going to do, no FAP and no porn September. So, let's hop on board and do this thing. That's actually how I got started. That was my first real, streak, so to speak. And that, well, that's kind of where everything took off from. So it's kind of an odd place to start. But, definitely that element of, kind of ridiculing that bad behavior is effective, as well as creating this, group where there's camaraderie in not exhibiting that behavior.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I think you're seeing that with other things too, like this nice guy meme sort of thing. I don't know if you're familiar with the book No More Mr. Nice Guy, or just in general sort of these themes that make their way across the internet, which is that the nice guy theme of, well, I'm a nice guy, I get friend zoned and all these sort of things. It's been shamed to the point where I think it's effective at preventing guys from being the nice guy. At least they're trying not to be the nice guy anymore. And for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm not talking about just in general being a nice person. When I say nice guy, I mean there's this sort of what I call the nice guy syndrome. And if you take a look at that book I just talked about, No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover, you'll see what I mean. But there's this whole generation of men who think that they can get everything they want by being nice to other people, or self-sacrificing for other people, and it's ineffective. And it's to the point now where even girls shame it. They like, oh, they're like, he's a nice guy, and like you don't want to be the nice guy because you're friend zoned by the girls and your buddies have no respect for you and other men have no respect. And I think it's effective because it's shamed. You can't come at it from this logical, pragmatic standpoint because that doesn't work. But man, you don't want to be the nice guy, and you'll do anything to avoid that meme and just not be that guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most people call it cringe. There's cringe memes all over the place too, and people taking behavior that is either stupid or awkward or exhibiting nice guy syndrome, like you said, and just make fun of it online. And they don't even have to explain why it's bad. They just mock it, and people get the point over time.
Yeah, you see it everywhere. I mean, my girlfriend and I will go out to dinner and we'll even be able to point out people who clearly have a terrible dynamic.
Right. Yeah, I've seen people on Twitter playing that game.
It's sort of a fun game, in a way. It keeps you honest too. It's sort of like, okay, look at that guy. He's like the cargo short and t-shirt guy. I know that guy. I got a couple neighbors that are that guy. But and it's sort of like the cuck meme. Like nobody wants to be a cuck. Because that became a meme, everybody was like, I bet he's a cuck. And then all of a sudden you're self-reflecting, like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that because everybody's making fun of that. And you don't want to be that guy. So hopefully porn gets down that same path. It's a little harder because you're doing it in secret and you think people don't know. And so it's a little harder to shame because you don't know that, or you assume people don't know that you're doing it. So it's a little tougher obstacle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely believe in, not only look into positive examples, but also look into negative examples, the people that you don't want to be like. Yeah. And finding out, why they are the way they are and how you can avoid that.
Well, negative examples have been proven to be more effective anyway. I mean, why do you think infomercials and marketing is always about, what could go wrong? And here's the problem that could happen. Here's the solution that we have for you to protect you and keep you safe. It's a marketing 101 sort of thing. Is you play on the negative side is way easier than the positive side. It's way easier to get people's attention. Why do you think the 6 o'clock news is all negative stories? Because that's what people want to hear. That's what instinctually draws their attention is the fear and the bad things that can happen. So,
it's like we're just naturally drawn to that.
Yeah, I mean, how many times is 60 Minutes about some happy story about some kid that cured cancer or something? It's always some terrible story about something that happened, somebody was murdered or some crazy thing because people are like drawn to that for some reason. So every hour-long cop show was always about all kinds of bad shit happening, right?
There's never and here's a day where everything went perfectly,
right?
Nothing went wrong, and it all turned out okay.
People aren't tuning into there's not like a cop show for an hour where it's like a guy saves a cat from a tree and helps an elderly person, down their steps or something. But so we're drawn to this negative stuff, all the time, right? It's just, you can't look away, sort of like the car accident thing. You just can't not look.
I love looking at car accidents.
Me too. Well,
that's my next worst addiction.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those types of things that are like plane crashes. I love planes, but I would watch videos of plane crashes for some reason. I just couldn't not watch it.
And on YouTube, there's just endless, dash cam videos too. That one, that was actually becoming a problem for me for a little while. I was like, I want more dash cam videos of stupid stuff happening,
stupid wrecks and stuff. Yeah,
that's going to be my next target after pornography is stop watching dash cam videos.
Yeah, it's really terrible. I remember a couple weeks ago there was that ride in Ohio or something where the ride malfunctioned and some people got tossed and everything, and one person died or more than one. But I couldn't not watch that video, even though I knew why am I watching this? This video came across my Twitter feed. I have no reason to watch this video of people dying on a ride, but I couldn't not watch it. And I remember being there in the kitchen, and my girlfriend was there, and she's not really I would say she's not nearly as fascinated with that sort of thing than I am. And even she couldn't not watch it. She's like, well, now we have to watch it now. Like, we have to watch this video. Like, it's just a weird psychology. Like, why couldn't I not watch that video?
Mm-hmm.
It's wild.
And I've noticed that it's the same thing at almost every level, even with pornography and stuff like that. I've noticed that on YouTube, the day one videos get the most traction. The ones immediately after relapse, those are the ones that people want to see, the ones that people want to find out, what happened, what's the scandal going on here.
Right, yeah.
And I noticed that when I had my first relapse after almost 2 years clean, that day one video shot right up way better than the other ones. And I suspected this long before that, to the point that I almost wanted to say I had relapsed, even though I hadn't, just to see, what the response would be and what would happen.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It's just a matter of our psychology. And I think, like we've been talking about, we can utilize that for better, to make a more positive impact.
Yeah. What is that too? Like, is that people, if you have the day one video, are you more relatable to them? Like, because they're probably on day one, and so they're watching this, and you seem more human to them? Or is it, a little bit more sinister in the sense that, like, this guy screwed up too. Like, I watched porn last night, and so this guy who hadn't watched it in 2 years watched it. So, like, I feel more, I feel less alone right now. I wonder what the psychology is that drives that. And I've seen the same thing. One of the things that makes my podcast popular is that, like, I don't sit here and pretend to be some expert on things and say I have it all figured out. A lot of it, I share a lot of my, failings, things that have gone wrong, or just my insecurities and different things like that. And that people seem drawn to that. And I don't do that to draw people in. It's just who I am. I just want to share. But there's something that draws people into, like, it's humanizing. I'm not sure exactly if that's the right psychology for it, but that seems to be the type of thing that brings people in. Like, we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have errors in things. And when you see somebody else doing it, you realize you're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's, for one thing, just that morbid desire for, some kind of scandal, some kind of, some kind of story that has like a dark side or a bad thing that happens. And the other part of it is, just wanting somebody who you can relate to, somebody who's honest, basically, because, we all crave honesty from other people, whether you personally are honest or not. People are drawn to that, and most people will respect that a lot more than they'll respect somebody who they think has it all together.
Yeah, there's really nothing that turns people off more than the guy who seems to have it all together, right?
Hey guys, here in my garage.
Yeah, yeah. It's like there's always that guy. Like, I remember this guy I went to high school with, and like everybody liked him, but it was almost like everybody didn't like him because everybody liked him. It was like, well, what does this guy do besides just want to be liked? He didn't stand,
like the Kardashians,
right? Like, he didn't stand for anything where somebody could dislike him. So he was almost annoyingly likable, and it was like frustrating. And then a lot of people were like, there's something, squirmy or sort of creepy about that, because it means he's not being true and honest. If everybody likes him and he happens to get along with everyone, that means he's lying to somebody, because nobody likes everybody. And so he's not being honest, and there's just a quality about that doesn't feel good. And I used to be that way. That's the nice guy syndrome a little bit that I talked about earlier, where you want everybody to like you, so you kind of shapeshift into whatever everybody wants you to be, so they'll like you. But people sense the dishonesty because you're sort of expecting something in return for shifting yourself into their frame over and over again. And there's something creepy about the nice guy because he's not being honest. If you don't have people that don't like what you're doing or don't like what you're saying, or you're not people that don't like you, you're probably not doing much anything. Because you can be the nicest dude in the world, like an honest dude, and kind of be doing the best you can to be moral and truthful and all that stuff. You're still gonna have people that don't like you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost get irritated sometimes because I don't have more haters, and I know that part of that is, and partly because I just have a really small platform, and generally the only people who find me are those who want to find me.
Yeah, right.
But sometimes I almost wish, like, man, I wish more people would come after me just so I know I'm doing something right. But and it happens occasionally. There's this one guy on Twitter who this weird thing going on about how great tentacle porn is.
What?
And yeah, it's the craziest thing. I commented on some other anti-pornography organization's post or something like that. And then he went after me and talking about, I think the original post was about how pornography harms, the actors and actresses in it, which it does. And that's, a valid point to make. And I brought up, well, it also harms the viewers as well. It's not just those who are directly involved in the production of the pornography. And he comes after me like, oh, well, no actresses are harmed in, animated tentacle pornography. I'm like, hold on, where are you coming from?
What?
Are you suggesting that getting people hooked on, basically bestiality is preferable to the alternative somehow? Because why? But anyway, he was just a little, no followers or anything, just somebody wanting to stir up trouble, I guess. But I do, in a way, kind of appreciate when stuff like that happens, because for one thing, you kind of get to publicly crucify him, and for another thing, it kind of confirms, yeah, I'm saying something that's upsetting people, so that's good.
Yeah, I think there's a part of that that's important. I've run into that where I don't want to stir up trouble with guests that I have on the show, but there's things I disagree with. Like just because I have someone on the show doesn't mean I agree with everything they're saying or doing. I view myself as a humble interviewer in a lot of ways, and so I don't always say what I'm thinking, because I don't want to. I have a guest on the show and I treat them respectfully, and I don't want to get into an argument with them. And I do that purposely, and I don't feel like I'm being dishonest by doing that. I'm not agreeing with everything they're saying, but that's just it's not the place for let's disagree and have an argument. That's not the type of show this is. But on Twitter, I'll do a little bit more. I'll challenge guests who I've had and challenge their thought process on things, because I don't agree, and I want to see our culture and our nation and our society go in a certain direction. And if I don't stand up for that, who's going to do that? And that's when you start to get hate. That's when you start to get people disliking what you're doing and what you're saying, because you're standing up for something that is in the best interest of your views, your beliefs, your family, all that stuff. You're putting your best interests first, and you're going to get people who hate you because that doesn't align with their best interests. It's just the way of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think having some kind of I don't know if you call it argument, but expressing disagreement is important, especially among people who you do like, because and I admittedly don't do this enough, but it's a good filter too, because at the end of the day, anybody who really is genuine is just out to find out what the truth is. Whether it's what they know or not. I'm sure I'm right about some stuff. I currently believe that I'm right about everything I believe because I believe it.
Right.
But I've been wrong before, and I'm probably wrong about something now. And I do want to learn. I want to be as right as possible so I can be as effective as possible. And anybody who really, really cares is going to have, generally the same mindset.
Yeah, and you have to have those conversations with people.
And that's why when certain people are not genuine or that they're wrong, because the only thing that they can do is resort to censorship. If your idea only thrives in an environment of censorship, then you probably don't have a very good idea.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of that right now, aren't we? In this climate with this Google issue and so many other things, you can tell pretty quickly by the people who are trying to silence speech where the truth is. because they don't have an argument, so they're just trying to silence speech.
And that's one of the reasons that I don't believe in legislating away pornography, because it's, there's, for one thing, it's got to be a personal decision.
Right.
For another thing, that's just totally overstepping the government's boundaries. And lastly, I don't like resorting to censorship for that, because it's not genuine, it's not honest, it's just trying to cover something up, and it's just wrong, I believe.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like I mentioned earlier about a lot of government issues, I think we should. I really would like to see a change of heart in people versus a change in legislation to make behaviors and things happen. Build a high trust society that can take care of their own without legislating a lot of things to require the government to take care of certain people or certain things or create safety nets. If we're functioning the right way in our hearts and in our minds as a society, by nature, the least of us is going to be taken care of without a legislative government action. So that's what I hope. It sounds a little libertarian. I'm not a libertarian, but a little bit along those lines, I think. And I agree with you about porn. I think, first of all, in this world of technology, I mean, is it really even physically possible to legislate away porn? Doubtful.
It's
right?
not.
It's
and anybody who tries doesn't really know what they're talking about.
I mean, it's impossible. It's really impossible to filter anything with the internet the way it is right now. I'm sort of curious how like China and some of these other countries really do censor the internet, because I just don't really know how that's possible, because there's so many technological ways to get around just about anything. I'm sure people are getting around these censors even in China and stuff. So I don't know. I think there's this fight for free speech that people talk about, right? And there's this free speech isn't really being censored. It's just being censored on certain platforms, right? Like we're talking about censorship where people get kicked off Twitter, or Facebook buries your posts or kicks you off, or you can lose your job for speech.
In the United States, anyway.
In the United
Europe,
States,
it's starting to get a little bit different.
Right. So, like in the U.S., some people are saying there's this limit on free speech. I don't see it yet, because you can still say whatever you want. Private platforms can block you. I don't like that, and I don't like the power that these social media companies have to censor that stuff. But they can do what they want. I can still say whatever I want, and I can't go to jail for it. So I'm still protected by the First Amendment because of that. But I can lose my job for it too, and technically my employer, I guess, has the right to do that too. So I'm not sure that we have a free speech crisis in the United States yet, because there hasn't been any. The government isn't doing anything to censor my speech. So I don't know if that's a fight that's needs to be had right now. There's definitely something going on with social media. I don't like it. I do not use Facebook for a variety of reasons. I hate Facebook, but I'm not sure where the free speech fight goes from here, because I'm not sure there's a fight to be had yet. Right.
I think that it could just take care of itself. Just the way that the internet works. You've got Gab is coming up now that Twitter is being ridiculous. And I actually really like Gab so far. It's pretty small. I'd like to see more people on it soon. It'd be nice if Donald Trump finally gets banned from Twitter and then goes over there and brings everyone with him.
That would be huge. If he opened a Gab account, that'd be something.
Yeah. But I mean, hey, it can happen.
Could.
Everybody said he couldn't be president, but he did that. So who knows?
Yeah.
It's a strange world we live in. But
anyway,
I can see a lot of alternatives coming up and kind of equalizing things. And I hope that people are going to realize that the places where you do have this free exchange of ideas are going to be higher quality and just better overall, more informative, more enjoyable for everybody. And then eventually that just becomes the norm.
Yeah, I think the bigger threat to free speech is probably people's livelihoods, right? Like we saw this with this Google memo this guy put out and lost his job. He's out there now. He's got a lot of support. He's going to be okay, but a lot of us can't afford to lose our livelihoods for speaking out on certain issues.
Oh, dude, I want to get fired.
You do? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm moving in that whole direction of wanting to be self-employed and all that. And you just gonna, there's just that part of you that just wants to go ahead and end already.
Right. Like you sort of want it to happen for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So you want to go fully self-employed, huh?
Yeah. That's the goal. I've realized how important my time is to me and how much of that, the job takes. So, and there's only so much that you can do as a mechanic. There's only so far you can go. But
how do you like working with your hands, though? I'm always a little jealous of people who work with their hands.
That side of it is awesome.
Yeah.
I like the fact that it is physically demanding and that it's all really, really physical work. And at the same time, it's still mental work too. Diagnosis can get extremely complex.
Right.
But it really is just really to the core problem solving and things like that, and then doing it with your hands. Yeah. Definitely burns a lot more calories and things like that than a regular job does. And you can tell just by the demographic that you work with. Super skinny guys and super fat guys, they don't do well. They don't do well at this kind of job because they're literally not cut out for it. So I do like that part of it. I like being in the relatively fresh air and all that. But it's a lot of time. It's a lot of investment as far as all the tools you got to buy and stuff like that too. It's it's a mixed bag. I think it's probably one of the best jobs that I could have right now, but it's still a job. Yeah,
I hear you. I think that's the biggest piece for me too, is the time commitment that my job takes. Is I'm full of ideas and things I want to do with my businesses, and the only thing preventing me is the time I spend at my job. And so it becomes frustrating because I know what I could do, but it's like there's this leap that has to happen at some point where I say, okay, if I have the time, I can make this happen. And it's a leap of faith where I let go of the safety net and then just go with it and make it happen and see, I can make a living without this day job. It's just that I'm sure every entrepreneur comes across that. If you didn't start off as an entrepreneur, you hit that
if you
point.
Didn't have a small loan of $1 million starting off.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like if you didn't start out with a bankroll, you got to make that decision of when do you cut the cord onto the day job to go after the big dreams. And it's not an easy decision for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right now I've been mostly saving money and working on, the other skills in the background. But there's only so much you can do there too, because, since it is such a physical, fast-paced job, you don't really have time to, work on other stuff while you're on the clock. You're always doing something.
Right. Yeah, you can't take a few minutes and write something, do that, right? You're just busy physically the whole time.
Mm-hmm. I can tweet every once in a while.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. All right, brother. Well, this has been a good talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, thanks for coming on the show, and so people can find you. Go ahead and pronounce your name again, your Twitter handle.
You can pronounce it however you want. Brohoshaphat.
I always say
people can't even agree on how to pronounce the original biblical name, but I say Brohoshaphat.
Brohoshaphat. Up till this point, till I talked to you, I would just say Brohoshaphat. Was like
well, a lot of people just call me Broho, which is
okay.
That works.
Broho.
But Ezekiel too. Really, the Brohoshaphat just comes from a need for a handle on YouTube and Twitter and stuff like that. That is unique, and that is searchable. It is searchable. It's kind of hard to spell and search, but it is searchable. It is unique, and I'm not going to be confused for somebody else at the very least.
That's for sure. Good stuff, man. Thanks for coming on.
Mm-hmm.
Take care.
All right. See ya.